this episode of The Sacred Realms is all about the idea of, I know a lot of people are hesitant to believe in something like this because it's hard to really come up with real solid evidence. So we're going to kind of delve into the idea of, is there evidence and are out-of-body experiences real? Is there any evidence for them? As I always like to do, I'm going to kind of go into my own personal experiences because they have taught me so many different things about the out-of-body experiences. It can be difficult to come up with real hardcore evidence when you're talking about something that's happening in another dimension. We can discuss this till the cows come home, as they say, but once you have your own experiences, they can really show you, they can really provide for you that evidence. And for me, I've had this happen so many times that I don't doubt it at all. I trust these experiences with my life. And it's interesting because it started with my very first out-of-body experience, which I've talked about many times. And that was, I believe, in 1985 with my brother. And what was so amazing about that out-of-body experience was not necessarily the experience itself, because it wasn't really earth-shattering in any way, shape, or form. What was amazing to me was the fact that my brother remembered the experience as well, and we were able to talk about it later on in regular waking world. That in and of itself seems so bizarre. It seems like those two worlds shouldn't collide in any way, shape, or form, but they do. And so for him to be able to talk to me about it, and for me to be able to pick up the phone and say, wow, that was pretty amazing. How did you do that anyway? He didn't have all the answers there, just like I don't have all the answers, but he said that he just had it in the back of his mind and he was hoping that maybe he would be able to make this happen. And so it did. The fact that both of us had these specific memories of the experience and were able to share them after made the whole thing so much more, it validated it, made it so much more real. Although I kind of suspected that they were real, of course, it put me on a path to really looking at them differently. Now, it's not just theory. Now I know that it's real. And this happened again and again and again. And on a few occasions, I was able to sort of prove it to other people. But I guess you can always be skeptical. I'll give you another example of something that happened to me. So this was some years ago. Just an interesting little story, but I was going through this whole thing that was kind of complex. I was growing dates and I was selling to Whole Foods markets. It had gotten really complicated because Whole Foods at the time had what they called a local forager in the Phoenix, Arizona area that was sourcing locally produced produce for all their stores in Arizona. So Tucson, Phoenix, and Northern Arizona stores as well, so Sedona and Flagstaff. They were really happy with what I was producing for them because I was growing a unique date that did not exist anywhere else in any of their stores. So they were thrilled about it, and they were kept prompting me and trying to get me to grow more for them, and they wanted to actually bring the product into other states as well. And I was hesitant, but I finally agreed to grow more for them. And they weren't my only customer, but this was kind of a big undertaking for me, and so I did that. And that particular year, once I got to the point of harvesting, everything changed at Whole Foods. It was a year that there was a lot of cutbacks for whatever reason, and they decided that they would eliminate the position of the local forager. She got transferred to Colorado. Now I'm dealing with someone in California who has no idea what my dates are and really doesn't care because she's got a lot of bigger issues and she's dealing with a wider area. So some little grower in Arizona is really none of her concern. And I understand that. It's not her fault at all. But now I'm sitting on thousands and thousands of pounds of dates, and I don't know where I'm going to move them. I guess I maybe should have worked harder to try to come up with more markets for them, but I was really counting on Whole Foods. So this went on for many months, many phone calls, many emails back and forth, and it was really complicated to try and get somewhere with a company as big as Whole Foods, which already at that time was owned by Amazon, which is obviously one of the largest companies in the world. So they can be slightly bureaucratic, let's put it that way. So anyhow, my sister was here. She was staying here with her husband, and they were in their RV, staying at my place, as they did for many, many times in the winter months. They were snowbirds at that time. And they knew my predicament inside out, and they knew how frustrated I was with it. So I had this out-of-body experience, and this is a common one that I've had, where I would hear a voice, but I did not really see anything. I tend to be more auditory like that. Not everyone has the experiences this way, but for me, this is the common way that it unfolds. So I hear this lady's voice, and I think it's a familiar voice. I've heard this voice a few times. She says to me, don't worry at all about the situation with Whole Foods. It's all been resolved. They're going to start buying dates from you right away. And I think, wow, okay, that's very specific. There's no symbolism there. It's not like a regular dream. She says everything's taken care of. Don't worry, it's fine. So I wake up that morning and I told my sister, I said, hey, I've talked to you about dreams many times, and I'm actually going to put myself on the line here. And I told her this story, and she said, so right away, when do you think that means specifically? And I said, well, I don't know. She didn't say, but I assume within a few days from what I can tell. And she's basically had this attitude of, well, we'll see, right? And I'm thinking, She said, so you feel pretty confident about this? And I said, I would bet my life on it. So less than 24 hours later, I got an order for $1,000 of dates from the store in Scottsdale on Mayo Boulevard, which is basically a suburb of Phoenix, North Phoenix. And I go over and I show it to my sister. And of course, she was quite surprised by that. But I think that she may have thought that it was a coincidence. I don't know. I didn't want to push the issue. But I think at the same time that she thought it was pretty interesting nonetheless, considering that it had been about 8 months since they had bought dates from me. So again, this is one of those situations where you have to go, that's pretty interesting. And not only that, very practical too. So I had another really interesting incident with the same lady, as far as I know. And this is when I was looking at buying a house. And I had looked at this house. It was a bank foreclosure. It's the house I'm sitting in right now, recording this. And there was a lot of bank foreclosures at that time. It was owned by Bank of America. You know, this is a true story because I've got all these details about this, right? The real estate company here in town did not have that property to sell. They knew it was going to be released to them, but they didn't have it yet. So I kept bugging them every few days, and I would call them up and say, hey, what's happening with that house? Because I really felt that this was a property that would work really well for me at that time. After a period of time, they're getting kind of annoyed with me, I guess is the proper terminology. Yeah, I would say annoyed. But I kept calling every couple of days, and they'd go, yeah, we know you want the house. We have all your information. We have your phone number. We haven't forgot about you. We're going to call you. So this goes on for about 2 months. Finally, I'm thinking, well, I need to really take the hint and not call them so often. So we go about 2 weeks where I don't call them. I wake up with this dream, this lucid dream, which I think is more of an out-of-body experience than anything, where I'm aware that I'm in the dream, of course, and I hear this lady's voice, and she says to me, oh, Bank of America has released the property to the local real estate agency, and they are going to have it available this morning, and you can proceed and buy the house. Everything's all taken care of. So, of course, I'm thinking, okay, that sounds great, right? So what would you do under the circumstances? I knew with 100% certainty that this was the situation. So I knew that the real estate agency opened at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I waited till a few minutes after 9. I didn't want to call them the second they got in the door, but didn't want to wait too long either. So I called, I think it was about 9:10 in the morning or something like that. And the lady answers the phone and she says, hey, yeah, I just got in the office. And she said, yeah, it's still not available to us yet. But at the same time, she said, I just got in the office. It's Monday morning. Haven't checked my email yet. So if you want to hang on the line for a second, I can, while I'm booting up my computer, I can have a look. And I said, yeah, that sounds fine. Why don't you go ahead and do that, of course? And I'm thinking, I'm kind of chuckling to myself inside, but I don't want to let on anything, right? So, of course, she takes a minute or two to boot up her computer, and at some point she says, "Oh, look at that. I have an email from Bank of America." And of course I go, "Oh, wow. How interesting that would happen on the morning that I call, right?" And she says, "Oh, you're not going to believe this, but it turns out that Bank of America," which I think was, that particular office was in Chicago, so it was in a different time zone than Arizona. So maybe 2 hours earlier at that point in time. I'm not sure, but I think that's the case. It made sense that they could have already released it to them because it was already 11 o'clock in the morning in Chicago, right? So she says, "All right, well, I guess we're all set to go and we can get the ball rolling." And I said, "Great. All right. Why don't we make things really easy here? Don't even bother putting it on the market because I'm going to buy it. I have the money secured. Everything's taken care of. Let's just proceed." And she said, "All right, that's fine by me. Saves me one step." I ended up taking care of everything. It took a couple of weeks to finalize, but I ended up buying the property. Sometime later, one of my neighbors asked me, he said, "How did you end up buying this property anyway? It never even came on the market." And I kind of smiled and I said, "Yeah, that's kind of weird, isn't it?" And I didn't say anything else. I didn't explain it to him. I didn't tell him what happened. I think I might have said something along the lines, "Oh, maybe I just had some inside information, I guess." And I just left it at that. So it's a couple of great examples of, for me, how there was 100% validation that the dream was 100% accurate. And it wasn't just a dream. It was obvious that I was tapping into some form of knowledge that was 100% accurate. And I was able to use it in my life in a way that was so very useful, obviously. If you want evidence, you're not going to get it from a book. You're not going to get it from someone else's experiences. You're going to have your own experiences, and you could ask for it too. You can always ask for guidance. You can ask for validation. And I'm not saying it's necessarily going to come, but it has a possibility of happening. And the longer you stick with it, the more likely that it is going to happen. And I think it can be kind of important because it can help you to kind of take things to the next level, to really understand how accurate, how important, how you're just tapping into this deep well of knowledge where everything is there. The possibilities are just endless when it comes to really accessing that, not just that inner knowledge, but things which are already known. I remember reading this story about the Wright brothers that invented the airplane at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. And one of them said at one point that they were asking him about his inventions. And he said, "Well, didn't really invent it. My inspiration came from dreams. And I was taken to this place repeatedly called what he called it the Museum of Uninvented Inventions." So when he saw those things there, he understood that it wasn't just a dream, that these were distinct possibilities for things that maybe if he worked long and hard on it, he could make it happen. So was that evidence for him, do you think? I would say so. So there's always that possibility, and hopefully the idea is not just to have some fluffy dream experience, but to have something happen that provides that validation that you're looking for, but also useful information that you can use in the course of your regular life. And that's when it becomes really, really valuable, I think. So if you want evidence, ask for it, wait for it to come, watch for it, and hopefully that can really take you much further on this path. So once again, thanks for listening to this episode about whether or not out-of-body experiences are real and can we get evidence to back it up. Thanks so much for being here for this episode of The Sacred Realms.